Hello, everyone. This is W, host of this podcast feature known as Surprise Cast. Today, we are leaping far across the pond from San Francisco all the way to Denmark. We have a special guest inside the digital studio to discuss life as an engineer, musician, a technician, if you will, someone that is very familiar working with so many great artists around the world. Who is this mystery guest? Let us bring him in. Hello, my friend. Could you introduce who you are and where you are podcasting from?
Yeah. Good morning to you, W. My name's Antony Ryan. I'm a Brit, but I live in Denmark, small town called Fredericia on the coast of Jutland. And I'm somewhere between a mastering engineer and a musician.
And a damn good one at that. What encouraged you to move from England all the way over to Denmark?
That's quite, if you meet a Brit in Denmark, they almost always have met a nice Dane. That was the story for me. The longer version is that after a few years of playing lots of shows around Europe with Isan, we had a final show booked for Fredericia in Denmark, and we were both very tired and we nearly didn't come. We thought, we've not played in Denmark before, let's go and do it. And we did it. And 3 months later, I was living here.
What is it about Denmark that you love?
Well, I have to say that this social democracy attracted me without getting too deep into politics. You can see there's a model, a Nordic model that seems to work very well. And I was a bit tired of living in the UK. So it was a great opportunity to come, and I like it. I stayed. I'll live out my days here. I got citizenship. So that's my future. We'll be here in Denmark.
Do you ever go back to England?
Yeah, I still have family in the UK and friends in the UK and play the occasional show in the UK. It gets harder and harder with the cost of things these days and travel and all of the restrictions that we've had since COVID, and just everything becomes more difficult. But yeah, it's nice to go home. And the first thing I do when I get home is, of course, straight to the chip shop for fish and chips.
Thank you for giving us a little bit of background. I want to know, Antony, what's been inspiring you lately?
I mean, I'm really lucky to live by the sea. We're about 250 meters here from the coastline on the east coast of Jutland, and we live by a channel. It's called Lillebælt, the small channel between Jutland and the next island of Denmark. Because, Denmark's made up of Jutland, which is a peninsula, and then you've got this middle island called Fyn, and then you've got Sjælland, which is the capital island. That's where Copenhagen is. So the major parts of the country are separated by water and bridges, and there are lots and lots of small islands around Denmark, and I just really, really love it. It's 250 meters. I'm down on the beach. So winter swimming, summer swimming. Well, it's not really swimming in the winter. It's a dip. It's, 30 seconds in the water when it's 2 degrees, and that's Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's 2 degrees above freezing. So, and it's always different. I run at the beach, walk at the beach. The air is beautiful. The sun, if it's there, it's beautiful. If it's not, it's beautiful. The wind, the rain, the fog. I love the fog at the beach. I find that all really, really, every day I feel inspired. The trick is, though, converting that inspiration into some actual music. But that's another question.
So I lived along the Pacific coast for many years, and I loved taking in the Half Moon Bay air, the climate. It nourished my soul. So let's go one step further in terms of your environment, that environment. How does it feed your soul? How does it nourish it?
It's everything from the tranquility to the absolute blasting wildness of it when a cold wind is blowing in across the Baltic from Sweden and Finland, But I think it's I like to run there, and I never take a podcast or audiobook or music. I like to go on the beach and I listen to the birds, I listen to the waves, I listen to the sound of the stillness. Some of these days when it's foggy and completely still, there's zero sound. Something I first experienced in Sweden actually was this sort of, the silent nature. And I really, really enjoyed that. I mean, I love working with music all day, every day, but the quiet, the peace, the silence, the background ambience, or the hearty chirping of a seabird, a squawk, of a seagull, it's all that nourishes me, I think.
Is it difficult for you when you go from that environment back to visiting family in England? It may be a little bit more of a hustle and bustle, particularly London, if you get to London.
I'm not a super fan of London, but definitely it feels different to go, to central England where I grew up. Just there are more people, there are more cars, there are more houses all squashed into a smaller space. But I often think about how it was when I was a kid. We used to have to drive 4 hours to get to the beach, and that was for 2 weeks in the summer for a summer holiday. Now my summer holiday, I can take that in the center of England and not see the sea, and that's a treat, right? So because I get to live by the beach.
One more regarding your environment. How do you think that impacts your work?
That's a good question. I think it's the ability to reset, because all music, apart from the most pure, and even then it's curated, field recordings. I was listening to Bandcamp Daily collection of field recording labels the other day. And these are, it's really just a nice microphone in a nice place, recording whatever's there, and then edited and curated to be, a release. But when you go to the beach, you get what you get, and there's nothing curated or edited about it. There's nothing manufactured. It's just pure natural noise and natural sound. And I think that's a really nice reset. So then I can come back to the studio with fresh ears.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard that before from artists in terms of their environment, that reset and how vital that is to their well-being, to their physical being, their emotional being. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I like this. You mentioned physical being. Sorry to cut in there, but
yeah,
I like this idea of one of the reasons me and my partner, we like to go winter bathing is because just immersing yourself in water, I think they call it grounding. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure whether, electrical particles are being stripped from my body or whatever, but that's also a kind of hard reset on the body. It's a physical experience. It's the same as even just swimming in the summer, go out for 10 minutes, swim a loop, back again. It's a physical reset as well as an emotional and for me, a hearing reset as well.
Yeah. We could talk, I'm sure, hours about how perhaps these kind of quieter spaces in these areas are becoming less and less because of all the noise, of all the distractions, and city life starting to really swallow up. So it's nice to hear that this sounds like a great environment for you.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty lucky to get to live here.
I want to ask you this next question. Before I do, I want to read you some quotes from some very famous artists, and then I'll ask you the question. Here we go. This is from Salvador Dali. He says, "Those who do not want to imitate anything produce nothing." Marc Chagall says, "Great art picks up where nature ends." Henry Matisse says, "Creativity takes courage." Vincent van Gogh, "I am seeking, I am striving, I am in it with all my heart." So here's my question for you, my friend. Was there an early moment in your life where art completely shifted your perspective? And if so, what was it and why?
I don't know that I experienced a complete shift in perspective from a piece of art, or at least I can't recall it. But I think just the gradual absorption, and I think one of my favorite artists is Mark Rothko. And I don't think I would ever have, as much as I had loved the works, and there are so many of them to choose from, and they're just deeply, deeply satisfying to look at. I've only had the chance to see a couple in real life, but I think absorbing the idea of how Rothko formed his paintings into the process of making music is something that I've acquired, absorbed, learned subconsciously, and at some point I thought, because as well as the music we make as Isan, which tends to be fairly melodic and quite often percussive, it's not ambient in the ambient sense of the word, I also make music as mugwort, which is just turned out of remixes that I was invited to do for people, and realized many years later that the pieces that I make as mugwort feel to me how a Rothko painting might emerge from a canvas. And that's I don't want to sound too like I'm doing amazing work or something there, because Rothko is, it's just his work is untouchable. But just that how it could be, what the forms look like in visually is how it feels in my head when these pieces of music emerge from what I'm trying to do with mugwort. It's very hard to explain, but I feel that was a realization there, that music can be formed in the same way as a Rothko painting, if that makes some kind of sense.
It does, and that's beautifully well articulated. Mark Rothko says, art to me is the antidote of the spirit. It's the antidote of the spirit. So tell me more about this antidote of your spirit.
I mean, that's the essence of great art, isn't it? I guess is that the insides come out without being distorted by the ego, or at least that's how maybe I would try to do it. Because once the ego starts to get involved and you're trying to be clever, and then you're just making things for the sake of making things.
With regards to your work and kind of merging the idea behind Rothko's work, this abstract sense, this canvas that he creates and that you create, would you say that you two are a little similar in that way through abstraction?
Well, I wouldn't want to. I don't know what. I don't think I could put myself inside Rothko's process or how he came to those results. And actually, that's not something I've ever explored, because I'm not an art historian, and it's not something I've ever really researched. But the end result is this warm, shapeful but shapeless, textured but also untextured slabs of something pleasing to me. And I'll never own a Rothko, but my son knows how much I like Rothko, and he painted. I've got it's on the wall. You can't see it from here, but I've got a canvas that he painted for me back in 2021, where he formed something, and he took his idea of Rothko and then shaped it further. Yeah, sorry, that's a bit of a side there, but I like to have things in the studio that are a touch point for me when I'm creating, to make me think about how it is things can be formed and shaped.
So what are those other touch points?
Well, lucky cats for a start. I've got a studio full of lucky cats. Those have always been I don't know. Do you remember a game for the PlayStation 1 back in like 97 called Wipeout 2097? And it was very famous at the time because it had The Prodigy. It had, what's his name? Loads of really excellent artists doing the soundtrack. I'm forgetting the names now. I'm trying to come up with, what was the name of the drum and bass guy? Never mind. And all of the artwork and the game design was done by the Designers Republic, which of course are very closely associated with Warp Records and Warp artwork. And there was this giant city futurescape in one of the intro videos, and on the top of the tower was this giant Maneki Nico lucky cat, and I just thought that's the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I've started collecting lucky cats since then, and it's actually the name of one of albums, one of my personal favorites from the Isan Cat's back catalogue. And to me, it's just a reminder that you can be playful. You don't have to be dead serious. I mean, to me, maybe the Rothko stuff and the mugwort music, that feels a bit serious. It's a bit gloomy. It's a bit maudlin. But the Isan side is where Robin and I, partner in the band, we've had so much fun making music for each other. And it's about playing with things, being playful. So yeah, the lucky cats are a reminder that you don't have to be deadly serious about all this stuff.
I love that you said that, because I've heard that from quite a few artists, where these changes in their perspectives on making music really happened when they started to take things less seriously and started to enjoy the process.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the artists, I can't remember who it was when you read out a list of quotes earlier. What was the first one you read out? Do you have
I
it?
think that
Still to...
it was
It was about
Dali.
imitation. It was Salvador Dali
Yes.
saying that nothing comes from imitation. And when we started, Robin and I, making music, we really wanted to be on reflex and warp. So we were imitating, Aphex and the Black Dog, and, actually, let's come back to the Black Dog, but we were imitating that sort of, more the D in IDM, the dance in intelligent dance music. We were imitating that, and we sent demo tapes out. We got them all back. And it wasn't until we started being more playful and finding old Martin Denny and Arthur Lyman records, and we started to find old records, old Moog records, these silly, silly Moog records that, like Jean-Jacques Perret, these Moog records that were just turning up in charity shops and car boot sales. And we started playing around with those and trying to incorporate that sort of exotic, humorous, playful life into our stuff. And that's what stuck. That's what sort of got us on our journey and got us our first couple of singles and took us on the journey that's, ended up with me here today.
Well, I'm glad you encourage play, and I think it's very important not to be preachy, but I used to be a school teacher for many years, and often I would tell my students, play with your work, play with it. You can play out in the sandbox, you can play out in the play structure, play with your work, see where it goes. Okay. I want to ask you somewhat of a challenging question. Could you tell the listeners and me what challenges shaped your path to where you are now?
I mean, I think I've been fairly lucky not to have any really difficult or severe challenges to overcome. And I've been really fortunate in that way. But I think that I don't know whether you count it as a challenge, but being brave sometimes has its rewards. For example, we were too afraid to play live when we first started, and we were asked by the labels that were releasing our records to play some shows. They thought we'd have fun. We didn't think it would be fun. And we resisted for a long time, and we missed a couple of really golden opportunities through not being brave either to play live or just not being brave enough to really commit to going with on tour with another artist. And I think that's something that we've learned, is to say yes to stuff and to be brave enough and to just, find out that you can do things if you really put your mind to it, and people will welcome the effort if you do. So, once we put our minds to it, and we found our way of trying to play music together, Robin and I, and then actually playing it for people, suddenly found out that we really enjoyed it, and it's taken us all over the world, and that's been really, just fantastic. No regrets about having made that decision to be brave and try and play music for people. And sure, it goes wrong. But do you know Piano Magic? A band called Piano Magic. The sort of the key driver. Well, he is Piano Magic. Glenn Johnson. He released our first album, and he encouraged us to play live. And this still sticks in my head now. He said, if people come to see you, they're on your side, so it doesn't matter if it goes wrong. They want to hear you. They want to support you. So what is there to be afraid of? And I think that was a really, really sage piece of advice from somebody who's has played a lot of shows.
Yeah. There's a great podcaster. Her name is Brene Brown, and she talks about this marriage of courage and vulnerability. Courage over comfort. These trials in life, sometimes we're so afraid to look them in the eye. If you could go back in that rearview mirror and some of those opportunistic moments, it's easy to say, well, I would have shown more courage. But what else would you have done to get through that hurdle? What was really inhibiting you?
I think it was fear. It was fear of failure. I think from my side, I can't exactly speak for Robin, but we came to, we'd had the same discussions, and we sort of didn't want to do it. It was fear of failure. And I think that's to draw a little parallel as well with the mastering career. I wasn't doing this full time until about, I think, 2018. I was doing a lot of work. I was doing about half the time, but the other half of the time I was still doing some technical work, some consulting work that I'd always had the ability to do, because like a lot of artists, I know there are some that you've interviewed, you can't just live off the music anymore. And I was doing lots of mastering work, but I was still hanging on to this contracting work and doing that about 50% of the time. So mornings would be contracting, afternoons would be mastering. And at some point I thought, for a variety of reasons, I wish I wasn't doing the contracting anymore, but will I get enough work to do to keep me housed and warmed and clothed and keep the lights on and all of those things? And I quit the contract and I went all in on the mastering. And I think within 2 weeks, my calendar was full of bookings, because I could say yes to everything instead of in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks. So, I mean, it's the same lesson in a way, isn't it? If you're brave and you get over the fear of, in that case, the fear was, what if I don't earn enough money? And then I can't go back to the contracting. If I give that up now, that's gone. There was a fear there, and just going all in and making myself available to it. I've been lucky. Now, how long that will continue into the future, that's with this industry that's constantly in flux for artists, engineers, all creatives. We'll find out. But I've enjoyed, just being here in this. I mean, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a musician. The first thing one of my sort of early memories from when I was 9 years old was hearing Gary Newman on the radio and sort of playing along, making Lego synthesizers to play along with Jean-Michel Jarre cassettes that I had. I wanted to make music, and now I get to every day I work in the music industry. I mean, it's fantastic. It's not what I imagined when I was 9 or 10 or 18 or 22, or when, there was a period of time where Robin and I, we were playing shows almost every weekend for a couple of years, and we could live off that. Plus the record sales, because people still bought more music back in, we're talking 2003, 2004, 2005. We played a lot of shows and we were able to, pretty much live off that. Now that is simply not possible. Not that we're that interesting anymore. We were, that was a different time. But I think for another artist who's in an interesting genre that's coming up now, I don't know how you would do that until you break that sort of, million streams a year, a month barrier, So yeah, I'm living the dream, and I get to work now for artists who have got 20,000 plays a month on Spotify, and then maybe they get picked up, and then they're doing 1 million streams a month. And then I'm probably not working with them, which makes me a little bit sad, but because I would like to still be working for them at that point. But the fact that they've, I've been part of their journey,
yes,
is just tremendously rewarding.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Antony, over time, you've learned how to lean into fear, being more vulnerable, which has allowed you to be more courageous within the work that you do. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah. And because there are more layers to this as well. I mean, there's imposter syndrome, which is a little bit of a cliche, I guess, but I'm here on my own in a room with kit, software, resources, experience that I think I've acquired. It's come from a love of music. It's come from a love of hi-fi. It's come from being a technical nerd. I sort of hinted at that with the technical contracting stuff. I'm a unabashed card-carrying, flag-waving nerd. And people, ask me to do work for them, and I do the work, and I think it's good. But is it really good? What would Abbey Road say? What would, Sterling Sound say? What would those legends? What would Bob Ludwig say? The legend, the mastering legends say about the work that I'm doing. So there's also that constant, I don't want to say fear, but concern. And I think that keeps you on your toes, because I mean, my model is I do the work, I send the invoice when the artist signs off. I never take a deposit up front. I never take payment up front. I only send the bill once they've signed off on the masters. And that's because it keeps me on my toes. I've always got to do the best work that I can and, just believe that it can stand up there with the best in the business and strive to be as good as that. And only the universe can decide whether that's.
I like that approach. And again, not to keep going back to my teaching years, but that's kind of mimics how I used to approach my work with my students. Never resting on my laurels, always kind of being on edge, trying new things, pushing new things. Not every lesson plan was successful, but this desire to feel like I was never anchored down in comfortability.
Yeah, because I think when you get comfortable, then you get a little bit slack, you get lazy, you get arrogant in some cases. I would hate to find myself in that. I mean, I guess I won't get in that position because I'm always, concerned about the job I do. But I think that would be an unsatisfying place to be as well if you're not finding something to strive for every time you take a job or learn a new tool or find a new technique or just hear.
Absolutely. And just the sheer notion of working with children, I didn't ever want that to happen, to feel like the room was stagnant and boring and an environment that they didn't feel inspired. That would bother me all the time.
Yeah.
So,
well, I guess those kids were lucky to have you as a teacher then.
Well, they do come back once in a while. Say hello.
That's the proof of the pudding.
Let's talk about your craft, your career, this thing called RedRedPaw. So I want to ask you this question. I want you to tell the listeners and me, how did your first mastering experience shape your direction?
I'm going to not answer your question directly and tell you about my first 3 mastering experiences.
Go for
because
it.
I think it's something that until we made music in our home studios with cobbled together bits of equipment, 4-track tape recorders, dumped it onto a mini disc, sent it off to a label, and were lucky enough to be offered a 7-inch release or a track on an EP, or and then with Tugboat, Glenn Johnson from Piano Magic's label, we got an album. But we, what is mastering? What's that about? Don't you just put the record out? So our first experience of mastering was taking, and this is 30 years ago now. We went to a studio in London that I can't remember the name of, but it was to get a 7-inch cut, and I think it was Damel 85, but I could be wrong. But I just remember going into this industrial complex in a sort of an old Victorian factory building that's been converted, and there's this room with this hissing, buzzing, whirring lathe with a giant vacuum cleaner on the back of it, and the guy cut the disc for us there, and he said, "Yeah, fellas, this is good. There you go. I'll send that off to get pressed." And okay, I mean, it was just this a really, really industrial experience. And then we got the 7 inches back, and they sounded terrific, and that was really exciting. But I mean, at that point, what has happened? What's gone on? What did they even do? I don't know. But we've got this piece of plastic in our hands now, and it was also our first single, so we were just really excited about having a physical record to sell, or that people would play. This was back in the days when you'd put your phone number on the back. I don't even think we had email back then. Sometimes you put your address on the back of a record, if people wanted to write to you. Anyway, sorry, I'm digressing. But then the next really eye-opening or ear-opening experience was I've always been really keen on hi-fi. We had our first record with More Music in Germany, and that was mastered at Dubplates and Mastering by Rashad Becker. And we got the test pressings back, and I couldn't believe that it was the same music. I could hear details in the music that I don't remember them being there before. There was this feeling of space, this perfectly balanced weight. It sounded like a good, really nice record in a way that just transformed the mixes that we'd sent off to be mastered. And sure, there's a lot of distance between recording something on a 4-track in the studio and compiling a DAT tape and sending it to Germany, and then some weeks later you get a test pressing back. This was back in the days when it only took a few weeks to get test pressings. Again, another story we should come back to. But that was amazing. And then the third experience that was really the formative one was getting to go to a session at Dub Plates and Mastering in Berlin with Rashad Becker. And he, welcomed us into the room, and he said, there are 2 ways that I can master this record for you. And I think it was Meet Next Life, which was our third record on More Music. And he said, I can either do it by the numbers and make sure you've got a technically good record. He said, or I can do it creatively. And we said, oh, do it. Take the creative approach. Yeah, please. And we were there. We got to listen. He said we could approve any changes he'd made. And then he started doing this as we got into the mastering the first track. He started doing this thing where all of a sudden all you could hear was the reverb and the space around the side. How did you do that? And he said something, and I didn't really understand it. But then he was able to bring up the reverbs and the atmosphere and the space. And then he'd say, you guys really like the bass, don't you? He said, yeah, I think so. He said, yeah, but maybe we should be really tucking that in a bit more. And he started to tuck the bass in. And then we just this picture went from this sort of square to this, globe, a 3D balloon floating in the air in the studio. And it was just, ear blowing and mind blowing that he had the appreciation of the music, the appreciation of the space. He had this wizardry, this technical wizardry that could transform the sound. And it was just a thrilling experience. And that really stayed with me. But I never really tried to do any of that until Simon Scott asked me to help out with one of his records, which was some years later.
And we'll get into that in a little bit. So in terms of your engineering prowess, your skills, what do you feel sets your master engineer apart from others? Why do people come to you?
Well, I think honestly, 80% of mastering is communication. And these days it's almost all on email. It's not often I actually talk in real time to an artist. But I think that's the first part, is you have to be a good person to work with and to communicate your understanding of just the basics first, to be, nothing's a problem. Yes, we can do whatever it is that you want to do, that kind of positive, encouraging, non-gatekeeping attitude as much as possible. And to try and make that process and the communication as easy as possible. And then the second thing is I think I wanted to take that approach that Rashad said, which is to be creative, and to the tools we have nowadays in software, to be able to really shape creatively. I mean, you can't remix and re-engineer a piece of music that's been recorded, but you can take certain, I don't want to say liberties, that's not the right word, but you can take some ideas and say, this is the real music for me. This is the bit that needs to come forward, and I'm going to expand that. And these are the distracting bits of the music. I want to constrain those, or just to try and not do it by the numbers, because mastering, it's a how to explain what it is. It is, and in the old days, it was simply the process of taking some finished recorded music and transferring it to a medium, which would have been vinyl back in the old days, and then cassette.
Yes.
And then it became CD, and that's where things started to go a bit wrong in the audio world. That's when the loudness wars started to happen, and music started to get really, really digitally smashed. Again, that's another side story that we probably don't want to go down. But now then you would do small balance changes. You would make it technically right to fit the medium that it was on. Now we have tools that allow you to be able to just, really craft, sculpt, create. I've just got some new software. It's called Ozone 12. It's got some features in it now where you can change the balance of just the voice. Mm-hmm. You can change the balance of just the drums or the bass or the other instruments. And you can do that in a way, if you don't do it you can always over egg the pudding, but just a little tweak here and there, I can make the vocals come forwards and be alive and sing the song. And that was much less easy to do in the old days with the classical equipment.
Yes, I imagine so. And I also imagine, well, if I were an engineer, I would love it, but I would also feel this tug of war within on like, how do I know this product is done? So I want to read you this quote by Rick Rubin, the legendary producer for Beastie Boys. And he says this: when the work has 5 mistakes, it's not finished. But when the work has 8 mistakes, it might be. He also says this: sometimes deciding a work is finished is more about surrender than victory. Talk to us about either of those quotes and how it relates to the work that you do.
I think that is not the place for mastering.
Interesting.
We should be the QC. We should be the place that filters out the mistakes, and it happens all the time. Even with the best engineers at the mercy of the tools, there's always a glitch, a pop, there's a dropout, there's a channel that's missing or something like this. And it's my job to say, are you sure that's right? Do you want me to edit that out, or do you need to send a new mix? Or, because once it is committed to vinyl or CD and you've had 50 or 1,000 or 10,000 made up, if there's a mistake that is really not the artist's intent locked into any of those media, then you're in trouble and nobody's happy. Now, what Rick Rubin is talking about there is something that I would absolutely, and we do, open-heartedly embrace in the making of music, because it's those happy accidents and even the missed accidents, just the little fairy dust, the little magical sparkle in a piece of music. And I think, as Robin and I, we embrace that serendipitous, we call it ice-serendipity. And this goes back to working on 4 tracks and stuff. You didn't have the luxury of editing stuff out on,
right,
223 digital channels in a DAW, in a digital workstation. It was 4-track, or what we actually used to do was sequence everything up and bounce it straight to mini disc. Sometimes it was just two channels, straight onto mini disc. So yeah, I think that's absolutely part of the creative process. I think it's absolutely not something that I wouldn't sleep if I found out that a mistake I'd let through was in a release, especially when it goes to physical media. Digital media is different. You can replace those in most cases, but if it's on a record or on a CD and it's in the shops, then...
But are you saying the victory comes when both parties can acknowledge, yes?
Yes.
All good.
All good. Yeah. There are times when I'll say, what's this? I think there's a glitch or something. No, that's meant to be there. That's okay, good. Then I'm happy with that. That's a win as well.
Tell people the nuts and bolts of mastering, because I think when people hear that word, they may think mastering comes at the very end. It could take 1 week. It could take 4 weeks. But I don't think people understand and appreciate the behind the scenes work. So walk us through that if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of technical stuff. And if you look on the internet about mastering, there's all kinds of tools, approaches, techniques and stuff. And we don't need to talk about any of that stuff. What's important to me is, sure, the tools are all important, the techniques, the things I've learned, the resources that I have. But at the end of the day, an album, for example, which I know is a somewhat of a dying breed, especially with newer, younger artists. But if you take 8, 10, 12 tracks that are going on a record, and the artist has thought about beginning and ending the record and what goes in the middle, and there's a sequence, then how do you get from the first track to the last track? You want to make sure that they sound good on all systems, whether that's a pair of ear pods or whether it's a little mono speaker at the beach, portable speaker at the beach, a Bluetooth speaker, or whether it's on a ginormous, $100,000 hi-fi. You want to make sure it sounds good in all of those places, but you really want to make sure that the journey feels right as you go from the first song to the last song. You'll have some louder songs, you'll have some quieter songs. You don't want to have a really loud ballad and then a really quiet energetic song. That doesn't work. So mastering for me is about shaping that journey as much as it is all of the technical stuff and the spacing between the tracks, how the fade outs work and how you come back in again. Sure, then it needs to be prepared. It's got to work on vinyl. There's some formats for CD, there's digital files, all the metadata, blah, 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 blah. That's all interesting technical stuff if you want to talk about that, but it's the shape of the record. It's where are the songs, what are the pieces, what's the music, what's the feel of the record, does it feel right when you play it from end to end? And I think one of the challenges that I actually enjoy these days, going back to the younger artists who aren't thinking about albums, is they're releasing single.
Right.
But I know at some point they're going to come back and say, okay, now we're doing this as a record. But all of those tracks have got the plays against them and they don't want to have to remaster them or redo them. So I have to think on their behalf in advance about where they're going to be in a year's time when they've collected 10 or 12 tracks to put together. And sometimes they'll say, but the master you've done isn't as loud as the reference mix that we had done. But those were done in isolation. They were done in standalone circumstances when you're only listening to that one track. Give yourself a little wiggle room for when the album comes together, because it won't affect the plays you get for this track, but it will sound better when you get to assemble a whole record. And that's quite hard to do in advance. Yes. And especially when I don't know what the next song is going to be. Is there going to be a ballad or are they all going to be bangers? And finding that right balance for the genre that they're in, the audience that they might have, all of that kind of stuff, I think is also mastering. And that's why I think I use the term mastering engineer to describe myself, because that's what they're called. Back in the old days, they were, and many still are, real physical engineers working on real physical machinery. Now it's about, it's a mastering ethos, I think. I don't know how you would describe somebody who's in that profession, but the ethos around mastering is making the music be as good as possible when it's presented to the listener in whatever structure it's delivered.
Okay, good. And I'm loving this because I'm learning as you are sharing. And I think people listening to this podcast are going, okay, that gives me a little bit more understanding and insight as to work you do. Let's go a little bit deeper. So in terms of finalizing the final product, we're looking at cohesion. We're looking at consistency. You talked about earlier fixing pops and clicks. I have a burning question for you, Antony. When it comes to actually putting the songs together to create that cohesion, the track order, the song order.
Yeah.
Do you do that first and then share with the artist, okay, here's what I think, here's how I think the layout of this album should go? Or does the artist, the musician, go to you and say, these are the songs I want in this order?
It's almost always the latter. Sometimes artists will give me a bunch of tracks and say, I haven't decided the order yet, but they're still going to be the ones that decide the order. But in 95% of the cases, if it's an album, and not this series of singles that I was talking about, but if it's an album that's been, created by the artist, they will know the order. Where I have to feed back is when I know it's going to go on a vinyl record, I'll ask them what they want the A and B side split to be. And then we really have to think about the duration and the length of each side there, because there are some physical quality impacting limits onto the. Now, I don't do cutting, but I have an appreciation of what's involved with cutting the records. And I have to consider what will be sent to the cutting plant, to the cutting engineer. If it's a 30-minute side, it's going to sound rubbish. If it's a 25-minute side, maybe you can get away with that, but it's going to be quieter. And is the artist going to be happy with that? And is the cutting plant going to be happy to cut that? If it's 20-minute side, and this is a 33 RPM LP, no problem. 20-minute side, no problem. So what often happens is an artist will say, here's the split. And I'll say, yeah, but that's 26 minutes on side A and only 15 on side B. But the last song is a really long song of 7 minutes. Even if we move it to side B, then we've got 27 minutes up side B. Would you think about reordering it? Would you think about taking a track off the vinyl and putting that as a bonus download or something else? So there are some, if it's a CD, up to 79 minutes. But even then, I have artists that come to me that are doing reissues and compilations with bonuses, bonus remixes and bonus edits and demo versions and stuff. And if it's over 80 minutes, Yeah, we can't do that on one CD. So then you need to think about, what do you want to cull? Do you want to fade early on some tracks? Do you want to tighten it up in the spacing, or just lose some tracks altogether? So I think I always say the art should come first, and then we try and get it to match the technical constraints. And the same thing comes from crossfades, which is something I really like to hear. I'm working on an album today that's got the one track fades out and the next track fades in. Where are we going to cut that so that it transitions, and where is the cut going to be, so that if I was putting a CD in a CD player and I just want to play the second track, how will it sound if I press play at the moment that I've queued up track 2? Or if I was a DJ and I was queuing up a track to play out somewhere. Vinyl, it doesn't matter, because you've got this continuous, you never just pick a hard. You've got the track markers on vinyl, but you can actually put the needle where you like. So things like that. And then in digital, if you have crossfades in tracks, but then you rip those from a CD to your personal MP3 library, there's going to be a gap. It's unavoidable on 90% or on a significant percentage of media players. It works fine on Spotify if you're streaming it. It doesn't work if you do it on Chromecast. If you stream an album from Spotify to Chromecast, there's a gap between the tracks. So then should the art come first, or should the technology come first? Should we let the art come first and let the technology catch up in the future? These are things that I have to inform the artist of and say, you need to make a decision about this. Yeah. So, and I've just done an album for an artist on Castles in Space, and there was a crossfade between the first 2 tracks, and he spotted when he played it in the car on his MP3 rips that there was a 10 millisecond gap between the 2, which is what happens because MP3s have a little header at the start of them. And there was this really unnerving glitch between the 2. So he said, no, I want to have the album, the CD, the vinyl, they can be continuous, but for the digital, this is going to fade out, and then we start the next track from a new place with a healthy pause between them. So then you have to have an artistic decision, an aesthetic decision about a technical issue.
Oh, God, I'm loving it. I feel like I'm in your classroom. No more me teaching. This is great. Okay, so within the elements of mastering, I want to know, Antony, what are still some of the challenges for you? Where do you feel like just need to muscle up a little bit more here? I need to learn more about this aspect. Is it within the equalization process? Is it compression? What is it?
That's a good question. What am I afraid to try in mastering is maybe another way to look at it. Do you know, I don't know, because I think whenever I have an issue or a challenge, there's always somebody on the internet whose experience is documented, whether that's on Reddit or a mastering forum or something like that. So there are sometimes questions I ask myself, how, for example, if you're doing a really ambient album, should I consider making the fades much shorter? Because when it's on vinyl, there's more surface noise. Is it okay to do that? And the answer is, well, yeah, check with the artist first. But yes, it is okay to do that. You don't have to stick with the full template that you've been given from the artist. There are technical things, we don't need to talk about the technical stuff, but if I've got a question, I can find a consensus online, and then I can try it and I can see if it works, because everything I do here is non-destructive. I can always revert to a previous version. I can undo any change that I've made. So in that sense, I don't feel that there's any question or challenge that's insurmountable. Maybe there are certain specialisms, that's not a word, is it?
I love it. Go with that.
There are certain specialities. There are probably people who work on restoring audio, and I don't have a good handle on that. And I think that's a niche that I don't need to come across, because I'm not restoring 78s from shellac for reissue.
I see.
There are people who do things like restoring from tape. There's a guy, I actually listened to him on a podcast called The Mastering Show, again, because I haven't learned everything there is to learn, just because I choose not to do restoration stuff. There's a guy called Joe Caithness who does transfers from tape. He's got an awful lot of experience of taking old stuff from tape and mastering it for reissue, and he uses tools and techniques that would be challenging for me if I was asked to do it. But actually, in the past, when it's happened and somebody said, can you restore this from DAT or some old reel-to-reel tape, I've said, go to Joe Caithness, because he's the engineer to do that for you. And again, that's part of trying to not let the ego stand in the way, is knowing when to say, I'm not the right one for you for this. There's somebody who can do this better. Again, so I'm not challenged by it then, but I know my limits, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's important to recognize.
I understand that you spent some time in a Swedish forest. Why did you do that, and how do you think that impacted you?
The reason that my wife at the time, she got the opportunity to learn to blow glass at the National Glass School, which is in it's a massive glass factory and small glass school in a tiny village in the middle of the forest in Småland in Sweden. It's 15 kilometers from the nearest town with shops in it. So it really is the middle of nowhere. And there was very little to do there other than go to the glass school, which I did for a year. So I learned glass blowing to learn to be an assistant, which is something I never thought I would have on my CV. But there was an awful lot of time to enjoy this wilderness. And I don't know if you really call it a wilderness. It's pine trees and lakes in every direction from the village. So you can walk out and be lost within, 10 minutes. And this is something that I remember. I was lucky to go to Canada when I was 18, 19 years old and went to the Rocky Mountains, and just experiencing some wilderness, open spaces, or just thick with pine trees, and just the only thing that comes back to you when you shout is your echo off the trees, and that was on tap in Sweden. And then, so that was just a beautiful experience to just experience the pine forests all around. But then in the winter, it really turned into something magical, because the lakes would freeze, and we would go out at night in the depths of freezing January, go to a couple of kilometers away, there was a lake that was frozen, I'm guessing 6-8 inches of ice. And this lake was singing as it cracked in the dark, in the pitch dark, in the total silence, because the snow hanging off every tree, it's like the ultimate acoustic dampener. It's almost like an anechoic chamber. There's no echo in the snowy seasons. It's dead. And there are no animals, there are no birds. It's the middle of the night. And there's this frozen lake that's just cracking under its own weight. And it sings like a whale. I never got a recording of it, but that's when I bought my first Zoom, little handheld recorder to start recording nature and the environment. I never got a recording of these lakes singing. It's actually quite difficult to find them online, but it is something unbelievable, because it's like Dolby Atmos. You stand in the lake and a crack happens nearby, and a telegraph pole where you've got this really high tension wire that holds the and if you hit it with a hammer or a spanner or something, it makes this kind of sound.
Yes.
This was happening under the ice, and it would race off at the speed of sound through ice over to the other side of the lake, bounce off the side and come back at you from more directions. It was honestly incredible, and you can only appreciate it if you were there. And I think that really gave me that inspired me to just integrate the sounds of nature into work. And it's quite often that this is my little Zoom recorder. It's a tiny thing. It costs, $150 or something like that. It's not the greatest quality. Simon Scott, he's got a very nice one. We'll talk about Simon again in a minute, I guess. But just plonk it down on the beach and just record the sound of no waves and no wind and nothing happening, and then use that as a bed in a track, because it adds reality. It adds some indefinable subconscious weight of the real world into an artificially created piece of music. You don't even have to hear it. It's just there, and it adds something to the.
But Antony, people are listening to this going, why would I spend A, my money on that? B, why would I spend my time on that? Because I can just go snatch that artificial sound from a site and incorporate it into the music.
And they could and they should do that. And I put the recordings I make up onto Freesound. And there's one particular recording that's had thousands and thousands of downloads. It's called Gentle Waves Peeling Left to Right. So anybody can just Google that now, and you can go and play it. It's on a website called Freesound, which is a Creative Commons website for sharing sounds of any nature. And this was a beautiful day, 10 years ago, maybe more now. I was down on the beach here. It was completely still, and there were these little waves, just gentle waves peeling left to right. And I put the stereo microphone in front of the waves, and the waves just go ripple, ripple, ripple from left to right. And it's a minute or two of recording. And I've had so many messages from people saying, thanks so much. I've used it in a theatre production, or I've used it in a film, or this was just what I needed for a game I'm developing, or whatever. And it's Creative Commons. Go ahead, do it. Be my guest, please. That's why it's there. So yeah, that was the right question to ask, because people should and can and will do that. But I just get a real satisfaction from knowing that this unique piece of sound that I captured on at this moment is embodied in a piece of music that I've made. And the Mugwood music that I've been making, I've just had an EP out that was made using my trusty little shortwave radio recorder. Just capture whatever comes through the ether on a summer's night as the sun's gone down, and suddenly you're picking up transmissions from all over the world, or the far side of the world. And whatever comes down, you capture it at that moment, and I find a way to use some aspect of it. It could be just the static. It could be some bleeps. It could be speech. It could be some tones from some music that's been distorted by the fact it's been broadcast from, the Pacific or the US. Actually, one of my favorites is there's this radio station that broadcasts from somewhere in the Midwest of the US, sort of Christian evangelical broadcast, and they do all kinds of conversations. There's readings, there's singing, and I just find it so exciting to think that this stuff is just hurtling through the atmosphere above us, and this piece of metal can siphon it down, and I capture it into my little recorder, and what I get at that moment is what I've got to use, and I have to make something from it. And
that is so fun.
Sorry.
No, I love this. And actually, I was thinking about my buddy Dave, who lives in Portland, Oregon, and he is not a musician, but he is an appreciator. He loves sound, whether it be coming from music, whether it be coming from nature or movies. I can't wait to share this podcast with them. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm going to list 3 bands here. The first one is One Dove. The second one is Ride. The third one is Slow Dive.
Mm-hmm.
All 3 of those bands have a member in that band that I greatly respect, and I respect the others as well. There's Dot Allison from One Dove, Andy Bell from Ride, Simon Scott from Slow Dive. Tell us your positive experiences whilst working with these 3 creative and talented musicians.
Well, I have to start with Simon, because we wouldn't be sitting here talking today if Simon hadn't asked me. We became friends after we we played a gig together. He had a band called Televise. We played as iSound in London back in 2004, 5, 6 maybe. I can't remember how long ago it was. And Simon and I became friends. We made some music together, which has gone under the radar. But we've been, we had a good experience making 3 songs together. Actually, one of my all-time favorite songs, "The Mercy Seat" by Ultra Vivid Scene. If you're familiar with Ultra Vivid Scene, Kurt Riles.
Yes.
I'm getting goosebumps even thinking about it, and I feel slightly ashamed that we had the guts. I was going to say another word there. We had the nerve, I should say, to do a cover of this song.
You can say balls if you want.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason, because it was a real touchstone for the 2 of us, this song. And so we did a cover version of The Mercy Seat, and also a song by Altered Images called "I Could Be Happy," which we did a really good gloomy version of that, because it was supposed to be a bit ironic or sarcastic. And then we wrote a song together that was on a War Music compilation. And then I moved to Denmark, and we stopped working together in that way, but we stayed in touch. And then Simon was releasing records. He was doing a lot of things with people like Taylor Dupre and Hanu. He had a label called Kesh, and he didn't have any budget for getting it mastered at a proper mastering studio. And so he asked me to master this album, Hintergarten by Hanu, for him. And yeah, the rest is history, as they say. That's how I stumbled into doing mastering. But yeah, Simon, back then, this was, of course, he is Simon, the drummer in Slow Dive. But Slow Dive were dusty artifacts of the past back then that had been deeply unfairly pilloried by the mainstream music media, certainly in the UK. I was listening to something the other day that, we use the word shoegaze now, don't we? And it's a whole genre, and we aspire to shoegaze. But back then it was a derogatory term for these bands. But I mean, I really, really loved Just for a Day. I was a massive Cocteau Twins fan. And I know Souvlaki is the Slowdive album. That's everybody else's touchstone, but mine is Just for a Day, because I loved that swirling, chiming sound, that sort of Robin Guthrie, Cocteau Twins kind of feel that was all over that record. But that's Simon Scott, the drummer from Slowdive, and then now he was at this point he was singing and playing guitar in this band called Televise, and we got working together, and so we've been friends for a long time. I was just speaking to him the other week because I'm doing another album for him now, but I can't talk much about that. But he's done the 3/4 Skies, he's recorded Simon Scott. I mean, he's just a lovely fella, and I've got a lot to thank him for. That's why I'm going on about Simon, is because not only did he kick me off on this career, which I'm eternally thankful for, he still asked, and he's a mastering engineer as well.
Yes.
He asked me to master his stuff, which is just so nice, and I appreciate that so much. And that's when I start to get a bit nervous, because I think Simon's a mastering engineer and this is his music. But one of the things about mastering, going back to the question you asked me earlier, is what's important about mastering? It's being a third pair of ears. Once you've been mixing and producing something for so long, you can't see the wood for the trees anymore. So it's the mastering engineer's job to give some perspective if needed and give a third pair of ears. And, that's hopefully what I'm giving to Simon now. So, but it's just so nice because, Simon then got me hooked in with Nat from Sonic Cathedral. And then Nat asked me to we put some compilations together from old masters and stuff. He was doing this series of 3 CDs to celebrate a decade, or I can't remember, was it a decade or 20 years of Sonic Cathedral? And then I did some singles for him to go along with this pack. And then I got to do these albums for Andy Bell and Dot and Steve Queralt, of course, as well, from Ride. I mean, again, Ride, 17-year-old me at the Students' Union Disco on a Friday night, swirling around the dance floor to Vapor Trail. I mean, it's just a thrill to be able to just have these, to be somehow in a little cog in this wheel of music that's encompassed an awful lot of my life. Sure, I went all electronic after there was the shoegaze scene, MBV, when Creation finally decided they were going to do Britpop. Meh. But then it didn't matter because Warp came along. And then it was, my musical career then been built on pure electronics in a way. But at the same time, I'm not a good guitar player. I have got a guitar over here in the studio, but Meet Next Life, one of our albums, there's quite a lot of guitar on that. One of our first singles has got a sampled guitar, and I'm doing this kind of just grungy, distorted thing, and then I'm using the whammy bar and putting it in the sampler, and then trying to be MBV, and trying to be Kevin Shields, and so those influences have always been there, and then to come back and get to work on the people who were at that time is just
You must pinch yourself.
Yeah, I mean I'm really fortunate. I'm really, and I will do it as long as people will keep coming to me, and there's some budget for this kind of stuff, and as long as my ears hold up. So, but it's a thrill to be able to do that.
So let's talk about Andy Bell, Pinball Wanderer. Share whatever you want to share about that.
Well, I mean, I do have the vinyl here, and it's always a real treat because it's some months between doing the mastering, and that can be quite intense. And I try to keep my professional hat on when I'm doing the mastering, and try not to get too overexcited by doing stuff. But then to get the records back, both Andy's and Steve's, and to put them on in the living room, which is a different environment to the studio where I'm normally working. So hearing it in its sort of natural environment, as it were, although my partner, she's got a massive pair of Dali loudspeakers. So that's always a treat. You've met the right person when they've got a giant set of speakers and a Riga LP player. So, and it was just, and I got from both records, I really got good shivers from experiencing it as their music as they intended it to be. And I had enough distance. After a few months, I can have some distance and forget that I did any mastering on it. Sure, I'm glad when the end of the side happens and there's nothing has jumped out as being, wrong or sounding not right. That's satisfying. But it's really nice to just be able to enjoy a piece of music that I like as a consumer, if that makes sense. Not a consumer, that's not the right word, but as a fan or as someone who listens to and enjoys music. Which is hard to do after a day in the studio, to be honest.
I'm sure it is. Absolutely.
It's difficult to know. We put the radio on because I simply don't know where to turn after a day of, whatever I've been listening to. But so those moments, I really, really enjoy them when I can disconnect, put a record on and appreciate it for what it was intended to be.
So you've touched on working with Simon Scott, Andy Bell, Steve Carell, both from Ride. And he released a great album last year called Swallow. I had the good fortune of speaking with him about that album and how much he embraced working on those songs. We're going to conclude this part of the conversation with Dot Allison, former lead singer of the band One Dove. So how did this come about?
Well, again, it's through Nat at Sonic Cathedral. And I'm really sorry, Dot. One Dove was something that bypassed me. Back then, it's not something that I was in my, it was not in my frame of reference at that time. So, but the first track that I did with Dot, I think is also Andy Bell and Michael Rother. I mean, it's Michael Rother from Neu was this I'm in love with the German film star. And this is a song that, I remember giving me funny feelings when I was a kid. Like, what is this peculiar music? This lady's singing with this funny delivery, and it's spacious and it's mysterious, and it's a bit, I didn't know what that cinema noir was back then, but it gave me a funny feeling. These are some of the reasons why I wanted to make music when I was a kid, because I got these funny feelings from listening to music. So to do this for Andy and Allison, it was just as a one-off single, and then there was some remixes with it. That was the first time we worked together. And then I've done a few other tracks for these compilations for Dot. And then there's the Subconsciousology, which is a remix album by Lomond Campbell of the consciousology. It's hard to say, isn't it? But
Yes, it
yeah.
is.
So, and I mean, it's just, it's just a thrill. It's just a treat to get to do that. And the sad thing is, because I'm based out here, I don't get to meet them. I very, very rarely get to meet the artists that I work with.
Yeah.
Once in a blue moon, they'll be playing a concert in Denmark, and I can go and see them, but it's very rare.
Do you do Zoom with these artists, or is it mostly email?
It's almost always email.
Okay.
Once in a while, it's, an artist will ask if we can talk on the phone, but I think, I don't know. I mean, I think it's fair enough. I think some artists are just happy knowing that, okay, we've done a record, we like how it sounds, and now it needs to be mastered.
Yeah.
And if they are happy with the results, that's great. If they're thrilled with the results, that's even better. And if they're just, I'm pretty sure that some of the bigger artists, not anyone that I'm working with, but I don't think people, the major artists are listening back to the masters of their album. They just trust that it's done and it's out there.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's it's the management, it's the A&R who approves the masters before it goes out.
Sure.
But
there's this.
Yeah. So it doesn't always, I don't mind if it's just a transactional kind of a deal, or if it's through the label and I don't even talk to the artist, the label does it in between. As long as everybody's happy at the end of the day, then I know I've done my job right. But if I'm in direct contact with the artist and they're thrilled, then that's my day, that makes my day.
There's a thing out there called AI.
Mm-hmm.
You ever heard of it?
Where would you, what kind of life would you be living if you hadn't heard of it, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, I've spoken to many artists, musicians about artificial intelligence, and a lot of them are worried. So I need to ask you, how do you see AI affecting mastering engineering right now?
I mean, it is affecting it. There's no doubt that it's one of the elements of change in this music biz that is impacting engineers. It's, I think, impacting mastering engineers first, because that's I'm going to do finger quotes here, the simplest task. It's starting to affect mixing. But, and there's a big but, and this is what I'm going to hang on to for the next few years, is that there are some very interesting and very capable systems. And I think when you look at this aspect of artificial intelligence, if you look at AI products that can do mastering or AI products that can do mixing, it's a very, very small and specific niche. And those products have been trained on specific music sets, and that training is encapsulated in a software object that is running on your PC or is running in the cloud. It's not like these large language models that seem to be able to have a natural language conversation with us about something we need to find out on the internet, or personal problems, or, just whatever, ChatGPT and so on. And there's a big difference between these two things. You could go online now and ask ChatGPT. I will go online and say, I've got a client who's quibbling with the price. I think it's a fair price, and I don't quite know how to position it. And ChatGPT will give me a reasonably good answer about how to maybe give me let me just take a step back, think about it, position it in a different way, and then I'll write my email. I never use ChatGPT to do any communications for me, but it's good to, I don't have any colleagues. It's good to get some feedback every once in a while. But this ChatGPT is pretending to be a human. That's what I'm sort of trying to get across here. AI mastering is pretending to map onto any track you give it a style which it somehow recognizes from the musical digital footprint that's, the digital fingerprint that's in this piece of music, in this WAV file. And it will try and map onto that a series of processes to make it sound how all the other tracks that it thinks have sounded in that genre. Now, for me, I've just gone to the latest version of Ozone that has an AI mastering assistant in it. It's very clever, but for me, it always over-eggs the pudding. Or too much egg and too much salt and too much sugar. And I would dial it back by 90% and say, okay, now let's start. And then at that point, well, then I might as well have just started from the beginning and just done it myself. Right? Yeah. But this is a piece of software that costs $200-300. And if I'm an artist that doesn't want to pay $200-300 for every single release that they do with a mastering engineer, then why shouldn't they use that? I don't think they'll get the best results, but they'll get something, and they'll get something that they are happy with.
Yeah.
Where it becomes less useful is that when even that home artist then maybe knows enough about their music to say, well, okay, it's good, but can you make it more, can you bring the groove a bit forwards? There's no product on the planet yet that can say, oh, sure, I'll pull the groove. I know what you mean by the groove. You want that funky bass line to just pop a bit more, or you want to maybe tuck the pianos in a bit because they're too, wide or whatever. There's nothing on the planet that can do that. Okay. But you could say that to me and any other mastering engineer. This is what we had in mind, and you haven't quite got it. Or actually, could we do more of the same? Or can you really bring this now we've heard it? And you can't have that conversation with these products. Now, at some point, somebody will take a large language model and glue that with a mastering tool set, AI tool set, and that will start to happen. But by then, my hope is that all of the artists will have 100% pushed back on AI being involved in any aspect of true creative work for permanent delivery, for permanent archive. Once you've put something out there, that's your archive. That is your music. It's out there. There will be people who won't want to have the AI virtual hand on their handicraft, on their handwork. That's what I think. But even then, there will still be times when maybe an artist, and this happens, I'll get an email on a Saturday night. Can you do these for tomorrow, please? Because they need to go on the radio. No, I can't. Yeah, because, it's Sunday tomorrow. And anyway, that's my choice to take some time off. But I will say to them, try Lander. Use the light settings. That'll get them in a place where it's good for radio, and you can be satisfied that anything. Because one of the things about mastering is, if you're working at a studio at home, you've got some nice monitors, but it's in a room. The room is about 80% of the sound that you can hear. You can spend 10 grand on a pair of monitors, but if you're in a badly treated room, then you're hearing more of the room than the speakers. So you can't hear what you can't hear. These AI systems can, to some extent, hear what you can't hear in the same way as I can hear with my monitoring what you can't hear. And they'll make sure that anything that's just ridiculously high or ridiculously low or is just really badly out of shape will be constrained and controlled. So that's a good thing. That's a positive use for it. And I would recommend that. If you want to have your music out, if you're desperate, if it's too late, do it. Yeah. But if you really want to, get the best from your music right now, you still have to engage with the person, I think.
Good. Thank you. Engage with Antony, please. All right, let's do some fun time here. I want to ask you a couple more questions that aren't truly related to your craft. Here we go. Can you tell us about a live show, and I'm sure you've seen many, that really stuck with you?
I can, and it's a strange one because of all of the fantastic shows that I've been to, whenever I get asked this question, and it's not just because I do a lot of interviews, because I don't, but people talk about shows that they've been to. It's a natural question at a gig is, what's the best show or and there's this really strange show that was a once in the universe's existence occurrence. When I explain, you'll know why that was possible. Robin and I, we went to Palma in Mallorca for a small festival at a monastery, as I recall, a really beautiful old stone monastery at the top of the hill and looking down over Palma in Mallorca. And on that bill was Damo Suzuki of Ken, who was going to be performing with some sound carriers. Now, I knew Ken. I knew a little bit. I'd heard about Damo Suzuki and his never-ending tour, but I didn't really know what to expect. And he's the loveliest guy you ever met. We hung out for a bit and we had dinner and, we did our show. And I can't remember how or what or where we played that particular night, because all I can remember for the rest of the night is Damo Suzuki playing with this ska punk band as the sound carriers. You know about how Damo Suzuki works with this never-ending tour. He rocks up at a venue and a band will perform with him, and he calls them the sound carriers, and it's all improvised. They play their style of music and they sort of feed off each other. And he sort of goes into this chanting trance to feed off the other musicians, and then they feed off him. And honestly, it was the most astounding performances. This energetic ska band were hopping and jumping around with this fast, janky music, and Damo was chanting and singing, and just, it was this looping kind of delivery that he does, and the energy just built and built and built. And it was a sort of an auditorium, I think, with fold down, like theater type seats, and the audience was standing on these velvet seats, these velour seats, dancing, and it was just the most incredible energy. And it has never been done before, and it will never be done again. That was an absolutely amazing moment in time. And I saw Damo Suzuki play again with some sound carriers. It was a prog rock band in Oxford, and it was good and it was really fun, but it didn't have this energy. And I thought that was just so interesting that he can have good nights, he can probably have terrible nights, and then sometimes he has these just mind-blowingly good nights. So for all of the major acts that I've seen, these other incredible concerts that I've been to, that's the one that always comes to mind.
Love it. I feel unfortunate I missed that experience.
Yeah. Yeah, but
I would have loved it.
There were only 80 or 100 people that got to experience that. And
Incredible.
I think the band enjoyed it as much as it was just fantastic. Yeah.
What are you listening to or watching on the telly or lately that you would recommend?
I think I mentioned earlier, it's hard to know what to listen to these days. So my default, which thankfully suits the family here as well, is there's a jazz radio station called P8 here in Denmark. It's like the national funded, there's a national broadcaster in Denmark called DR, and they have a jazz station called P8, and that has a presenter on there called Jonas Visti, and on Friday evening, Saturday afternoons and Sunday evenings, he has 3 shows, one for about the weekend, one called Visti's Vinyls, and another one called Aftenland, which means Evening Land. The one is sort of just all kinds of music to get you ready for the weekend, but it's always a little bit quirky. His vinyl album is Brazilian music from Cape Verde, from all over the world. Genuine records, a lot of soul, a lot of funk, a lot of bossa nova, just all kinds of world music genres, is fantastic. And then his evening program is more ambient, calm, considered Sunday evening. And there is never any one of these programs where I don't reach for Spotify afterwards and take something I've heard and put it in my playlist to listen to another time. And I won't read you a list of all of those artists now, but there's always some terrific stuff. And then what's really, and this is my ego coming out a bit now, every now and again I'll hear something and think, this sounds familiar, I know this. It's because I've mastered it. That's usually on the evening station, on the Aftenland, the ambient station. It's an artist called Rumpistol Space Gun in Denmark that I've worked with for many, many years, and his stuff is featured quite often on this program, and that's always a treat.
Yeah.
Also, because when it's finished, I can say, well, that sounded okay on the radio, so I'm doing something right. That sounded okay on the Sonos in the kitchen.
Love it, love it, love it. What is the most unusual sound you've ever used in a recording?
Yes, I was just going to say, one of them was I once took 2 pint glasses and bounced them together because they make this kind of logarithmic exponential sound. If you sort of, I can't demonstrate it because I don't have any pint glasses with me. But if you take 2 glasses and let them bounce off each other, it's like a marble bouncing on a hard table. It goes dunk 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 dunk. But when you do that with a pair of pint glasses, they've got this beautiful resonant bell kind of sound. I used that in a track once.
What's next for you?
Well, hopefully more mastering. I've got projects booked up for the next week or so, which is good. So if that's, I hope that's going to continue. But other than that, I think Robin and we're going to make another concerted effort to try and start making music again after what's been quite a period of not really being satisfied with what we've produced. So we've talked about a couple of strategies to how we might approach that. Because it's our 30th anniversary this year of our first single.
Wow.
So, and we've done hundreds of tracks, and they're always, I'm trying to please Robin and, amuse him, and he's always trying to do the opposite to amuse me. So we have to find a way of entertaining each other. And that gets harder, and it's natural, isn't it? It gets harder and harder to do. Yep. But lately I've been inspired again by the shortwave radio, and I've got a couple of new toys that I want to use to extract some sounds from the ether and manipulate those. So do some more mugwort music if I can.
Where can people find your work? How can they get in touch with you?
Well, for mastering, one of the reasons that I chose the name RedRedPaw, apart from the fact it just popped into my head while I was living in Sweden, is because it's quite Googleable. So you can Google for RedRedPaw and it'll bring you to my website, and there's a contact form if people want to get in touch. But I'm also on Instagram, RedRedPaw, and Blue Sky and Facebook. So I can be found in all of the usual places there. And then ISAN, we at isan.co.uk, and if you type us into Spotify or Apple Music, we are the first hit for ISAN. Great. There are quite a few other artists called ISAN, as it turns out. We didn't know that when we picked the name back in 1994. We also didn't know it was a whole region of Thailand back then. But that was before the internet. You couldn't find stuff out like that without going to the Encyclopedia Britannica. So yeah, so that's where we are.
Are you ready for your last question, my friend?
Shoot.
What do you think has been one of the most rewarding parts of your journey so far?
The most thrilling thing that I can recall is hearing our music being played on the radio, on national radio, and hearing it in your kitchen on, and I know that's an ego thing, isn't it? But it's also just tremendously, I mean, that's something we did here. We sent it off somewhere, and then it went to some people who found it and thought that they liked it, and then that ended up in the DJ's box and he played it on the radio. And I know you spoke with David Gedge about John Peel, but it was mostly John Peel that played our stuff. And to have that experience of some innocent young men who've made some music in their bedrooms, to suddenly hear it coming through the kitchen radio on Radio 1, the national radio station, by the legend John Peel on a Tuesday evening, because he used to have shows every evening back then, is just, I mean, it doesn't really get much better than that. And then by the same token, to walk into a supermarket or a restaurant here and hear something that I've mastered coming through the speakers, and to be able to say, I can hear the song, I can hear the words, I can hear the melody, I did my job okay there. When it's coming through a ceiling speaker in a supermarket, that's not a test that everybody gets to do. Everybody's heard about the car test, right? You get some music, you play it in the car. If it sounds good in the car, that's the winner, But the supermarket test, that's the acid test for me. So that's just really satisfying to know that I did my job right, and that wherever it's ended up in the world, in whoever's ears and from whichever speaker it was transmitted to those ears, I did my part of it, which is only a small part at the end of the day. I've talked a lot about mastering today. It's just the last little bit of the process. It always starts with the music. It always starts with the artist, with their creative vision. It comes from talented producers. It comes from talented writers. It comes from talented mixing engineers. All I have to do is to just file off the burrs, polish the glass parts of it, put some steel wool on the metal parts, and say, there you go, there's your music. It's ready to go.
Yes, and I would say that there are many people that respect what you do, and you go to your homepage and you can see the list of clients and people that you work with, artists, musicians, and there is an extensive list of some well-known artists and not so well-known. But what to me that really says is the body of work that you continue to produce and your style of communication. And you alluded to that earlier, something you're very good at. And yeah, it's wonderful. So keep up the great work, Antony.
Thank you. I will do my best.
Thank you for this conversation. It has been a real treat. As I mentioned earlier in a conversation that I was an educator, and I feel like I've been educated in such a positive way and stimulated to learn more about your craft, and much continued success. I would like to end on one more quote. You're welcome.
Yeah.
This is again by Rick Rubin, but we're not going to talk about it. All art is work in progress. It is helpful to see the piece we're working on as an experiment, one in which we cannot predict the outcome. Whatever the result, we will receive useful information that will benefit the next experiment. If you start from the position that there is no right or wrong, no good or bad, creativity is just free play with no rules. It is easier to submerge yourself joyfully in the process of making things. We are not playing to win. We are playing to play. And ultimately, playing is fun. Perfectionism gets in the way of fun. A more skillful goal might be to find comfort in the process, to make and put out successive works with ease. Rick Rubin, The Creative Act, A Way of Being. My name is W. Thanks for tuning in to Surprise Cast. And remember this, everyone. Great audio, masterful engineering is all around us. All you have to do is keep your ears open. Ciao.